Right now, on planet Earth, we are faced with the greatest pandemic in all of history. A pandemic is a worldwide epidemic. And this pandemic is called cancer. 100 years ago, 0.5% of Americans got cancer. Today, 1 out of 2 men alive will get cancer in their lifetime, and 1 out of 3 women will get cancer in their lifetime.
The World Health Organization just came out with a recent study, and they said that cancer statistics are tragic and epidemic, and they're soaring. In the next 20 years, cancer statistics are going to soar 57%.
And when I first started as an integrative medicine physician, my goal was just to treat primary care conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, obesity, depression, blood pressure, for example. But as the prevalence of cancer started to grow, my practice started to grow as well.
We are unbelievable beings, intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, physically. We are magnificent creatures. We have to say, this is not okay.
Unfortunately, it's true. Cancer is on the rise and has been for over 100 years. It's believed that in 1905, only 0.05% of people had cancer. In 1950, that number rose to 10%. And today in the United States and other developed countries, that number has increased to 33% of women and 50% of men, diagnosing over 10 million people annually, killing 6 million people globally. And if something doesn't drastically change, it is projected that cancer will increase by 57% around the world over the next 2 decades. If this tragic trend continues, it means for every family of 4, the children, the parents, or the entire family could have cancer in their lifetime.
When I was born, cancer was the 10th cause of death in children. Today, it's the first cause of death in children. When my father was born in 1900, 1 in 33 had cancer of any kind, shape, or form. Today, it isn't a question of will I have cancer, it's a question of when.
At the end of the day, no matter how much money you have, it doesn't show that you'll have an improved outcome. And in fact, having insurance itself doesn't show that you'll have an improved outcome. It just means that you get current care, right, and access to care. But the current care and access to care right now is not to be proud about. The United States right now is ranking 46 out of 48 industrial nations in terms of outcomes, right, cancer including. So there's 46 other countries that are doing better than us.
So we are not doing well. We are spending the most amount of money to take care of people, and we're getting very, very poor, inadequate, deficient results. So we all have to say, we're all paying for this because we're all in this together. And we all have to say, we have to stop, look, and listen. What are we doing?
Really, health is so important. It's more valuable than wealth. And a lot of people don't understand that because they've never been sick. And you ask any rich tycoon with cancer if he traded all for his health, and what's he going to say? He's going to say yes.
It's an amazing paradox we're facing. On one hand, we extended our lifespan, and also we enjoy more comfort of life. You have more abundant food, more comfortable environment, for most of us. And yet we have more disease, more list of different diagnoses, more challenges, and deeply have more stresses. I think that is one main reasons we experience all these different kind of disease more than before, including cancers.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer when I was 26. And I thought I had an ulcer, and I was misdiagnosed. And the doctors eventually ordered a gastroenterologist to do a colonoscopy, and they found a golf ball-sized tumor in my large intestine. And so I was basically rushed into surgery, and I had no experience with cancer at that time. I'd never had any friends diagnosed, no family members. I just really didn't know anything about it. And so I was a very typical cancer patient in that way, clueless. And the way the cancer industry works is they use fear to rush you into surgery, chemo, and radiation. And you really don't have time to think about your life. You don't have time to think about why you're sick, maybe what you need to change in your life. and you're just quickly put on this conveyor belt. And so I had surgery. They took out a third of my large intestine. And when I woke up from surgery, they said, well, it's worse than we thought. You're stage 3. It spread to your lymph nodes. We took out everything we could see, but you're going to need 9 to 12 months of chemotherapy. And at that point, I just accepted that this is my life. And I'm a cancer patient, and I guess I'm going to have chemo. And, it was a very strange time for a 26-year-old.
I was diagnosed whenever I was 15, and at first they thought it was cancer, and then they had the biopsy, and that determines what specific tumor it was. And later on, I went through chemotherapy for a year and a half, and it was very exhausting. I just felt really tired and overwhelmed, and I felt like a zombie.
So I had it the first time in 2010. I was diagnosed with stage 3 and got through that journey, felt maybe what you might say a little bit overly confident. And then in 2012, it came back and it was stage 4 with metastases to the bones.
So when I had the first episode of breast cancer diagnosed, I went into the same shock that everybody goes into, only I had a foundation under me of intuition and a couple of decades of learning to support me through the terror.
When a person has a cancer and gets a conventional diagnosis that the cancer is running out of control and their life is being threatened, of course, when they leave that doctor's office, they're living in total fear now of a time bomb ticking in their own biology. This fear actually is in itself what can aggravate the cancer even more, because the stress chemistry of fear is not going to stop the cancer, but actually promote its growth.
There's an epidemic both of cancer, that the cancer incidence and death rate continues to rise, and the trust of patients in doctors has diminished tremendously. We used to be looked as, saviors in white coats. Now, patients are becoming to see doctors as their foe. Why? Because the first thing that a doctor is going to do to a patient is get information sufficient so that they cannot be sued. So we are taught actually in medical school to always give the worst case scenario. So you're dead, and I'm going to do everything that I can to help you. But since I told you that you're dead, you can't sue me anymore. And it's horrible.
The good news is thousands of people have already reversed cancer and improved the quality of their life without toxic treatments, and many others are preventing ever getting cancer in the first place. There is a lot of evidence, data, and firsthand stories indicating that your odds of getting cancer can be reduced, and your ability to reverse cancer can be increased not by totally avoiding the medical industry, but actually learning how the natural and holistic evidence-based medicine can work together in harmony with the latest medical treatments to create a truly integrative approach to health and healing.
The idea, the word cancer is such a frightening word, and new discoveries are overturning 150 years of the way we've been taught to think about ourselves and our relationship to our bodies. And that means that those new ideas are also changing the way we have been conditioned to think about disease, including cancers.
I've talked to well over 5,000 people in 67 countries all over the world about their cancer. So believe me, they've taught me why people get cancer and how they get over it. Believe me, I've learned that.
If my body brought this to me, it can take it away, because our human body, it does a lot of miracles. It performs many miraculous things.
And I've seen some very, very good cases. Thyroid cancer, stage 4, going into total remission, been in remission for 3 years. I've seen very good responses to lymphoma. I had a patient I had been working with who was paralyzed from the waist down. After 1 week on sodium selenite, he was up and walking normally. I've seen responses to breast cancer. One of the doctors I work with had an excellent response to malignant glioma. In a very short time, a reduction of tumors by about 75% in their size. Prostate cancer is responding extremely well. One of the doctors I work with is stating fantastic results in 6 of 7 prostate cancer patients.
So I had cancer at one point, and I healed it holistically, alternatively. And I want to help empower people with the knowledge that there are choices out there. There isn't one way to go about trying to heal your cancer. The traditional method is not, it's what everybody knows, but it's certainly not the only way you can heal your cancer.
30 years ago, alternative medicine was quackery, and there were huge attempts to try and marginalize or eradicate any modalities that didn't fit within the kind of biomedical, scientific, technological framework. As people became more and more inspired, as they began to see examples of traditional Chinese medicine, for example, as being very helpful, acupuncture or herbs, people began to demand that they have access to these kinds of treatments. And more important, they began to demand that there be an evidence base for those treatments. So the National Institutes of Health, which is in a certain sense an oxymoron because it is the National Institutes of Disease, but it began to feel the pressure of the consumer and of the taxpayers. And so that led to the beginnings of the Office of Alternative Medicine and then now the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine. We still have a long way to go. Their budgets are very limited relative to organized, medical research. But it speaks to the fact that we have the power within us to change the system and to call for a new model of healthcare that can meet us in our fullness.
We need to understand that the traditional medical world operates out of a paradigm that essentially is based on medication, medicating symptoms, working with invasive procedures and surgeries. Their paradigm, what they've been trained in, their model of the world is not from that place of understanding the root cause issues that gave birth to these conditions, that generated these conditions. They have only been trained how to, as they say, cut, burn, slash, how to medicate, how to go after symptoms. The integrative medical world or traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine, these are modalities that understand that cancer is the body that is so toxic, so out of touch with itself, that it is creating this chaotic pattern that's not responding. We need to bring it back into harmony. Cancer is the end result of disturbed processes that have gone on in some cases for decades.
My name's Nathan Crane, and I began this mission of seeking truths in health when I was 18 years old after experiencing chronic health conditions, brutal addiction, and multiple near-death experiences. 13 years later, and after thousands of hours of research, interviews, and personal experimentation, I've come to see that not only can human beings do miraculous things such as reverse cancer, but if given the right conditions, can prevent and reverse all diseases known around the world. After thousands of pages of research, hundreds of interviews with neuroscientists, cell biologists, health experts, medical doctors, naturopaths, holistic healers, and incredible healing stories from real people who have overcome cancer and other degenerative diseases, I have found fundamental commonalities among people who have the most success healing themselves of cancer, and that's what we explore deeply in this film. My personal journey relating to cancer began after 6 years of research and experimentation with health and wellness, starting to feel fairly confident in my knowledge of health at that time, though not really having any direct experience with cancer until my grandfather was diagnosed. By the time I was able to visit him in Arizona, he was already deeply suffering from the typical allopathic treatment of chemotherapy. He was so sick most of the time and in such tremendous pain that simply standing up and walking to the restroom was a terrifying experience for him. I so badly wanted to help him and point him in the right direction of how to reverse his symptoms and his pain and his suffering. But honestly, I was like most people when it comes to cancer. I was uneducated, helpless, and afraid. And even with the financial means to afford the best medical treatment options available, he still was unable to overcome cancer and died on April 29th, 2013 in Mesa, Arizona. Shortly after, I committed myself to learning everything I possibly could about how to reverse cancer, so if this terrifying disease ever showed up in my family again, I would know what to do. One thing became very clear. To fully understand how to reverse cancer, we must first understand the cause and condition of cancer and all diseases that affect the human body, because the evidence suggests that every disease, including cancer, stems from similar circumstances.
So far, most of the cancer industry does not feel comfortable talking about the causes of cancer. They want you to believe, in essence, that cancer is spontaneous, that it is something that happens without a cause, which, if you think about it, is a very unscientific notion. How can something spontaneously happen without a cause? Cause and effect are in place in our universe, right? So if you have cancer, there have to be causes, and those causes have to be something more than just genetic.
So a lot of people look at cancer as a disease or something to be avoided, as opposed to looking at it as it's a natural result of a set of conditions. And if you alter those conditions, it's quite possible to alter the result. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that.
Cancer is a very personalized condition. And the condition is the result of only one of two possibilities. Either we have too much of something we do not need, or not enough of something that we require in our bodies that triggers our bodies into a process where we begin to express that through the genes.
Health is not something that you can catch, but rather earn. Okay, and just like disease is not something you catch, it's something you earn.
Traditionally, cancer is viewed as an infection, for example, right? We go in, we kind of remove it, we blast it with radiation and chemotherapy, kind of treating it like a pneumonia, for example. But it's not. What happens is cancer is not from outside, it's from within. It's the loss of self. So I always tell my patients, cancer is like an orchestra. Your cells are all communicating. There's a variety amount of cells that play different types of instruments in music, and they all play a certain role. But over time, through certain unhealthy lifestyle behaviors, dietary factors, and environmental toxins, some of these orchestral players start to think outside the box, and they're going to say, I want to play my own music.
Every one of us that has not had a cancer diagnosis has had cancer cells every single day of our life. So looking at this as some kind of an invading enemy that's somehow gotten into your breast or your colon or your prostate or wherever the cancer appears is just nonsense, in my opinion. Absolute nonsense. It's a model of cancer and other degenerative conditions that we have that doctors are taught in medical school that they need to treat the symptoms of this thing that's presented itself in our bodies. They need to take this enemy out of our bodies. 90% of the time cancer appears as a tumor. Well, what is a tumor? When you study cancer enough, you realize that a tumor is simply a collection of malignant cells and other cells that the body has elected to wrap in tissue because it has exceeded the immune system's ability to take care of the cancer cells and keep them under control. So the body recognizes this, it's very intelligent, and says, uh-oh, my primary system hasn't worked. I need to try something else. And so it wraps these malignant cells in tissue. Well, that's what a tumor is, basically. And because the cells inside it keep dividing out of control, the tumor will gradually grow in size. And eventually it'll be discoverable.
Yeah, so everyone has cancer cells. This is known. Cancer never hurts a person except for the very latest stages. The average person has cancer in their body for 7 years before they're even diagnosed. They have no idea. You can have a tumor in your brain and not even know. You can have a tumor in your lungs for years and have no idea, in your ovaries, anywhere. It's only once, and all along, that tumor is actually helping you cope with how you're eating unknowingly, or how you're thinking unknowingly, or how you're feeling with things that might be going on that you're not able to resolve or avoid. So cancer actually extends a person's life. Now, it becomes a serious problem, obviously, in the end. See, it never actually becomes a problem until late stages, because there's always a point where we can take responsibility and change what's going on.
The first and most important thing that people need to recognize is that cancer is not an invading microorganism. It's not like malaria. You weren't attacked by cancer from the outside. This is a mindset shift that is crucial to the healing process. Cancer is an expression of an imbalanced cellular physiology. That's really what it is, which means that your body's cells aren't talking to each other in the correct way. The DNA is not being expressed in the correct way.
What we understand from an integrative standpoint is cancer is a metabolic disease. So if you understand what feeds cancer cells to grow, such as inflammation, elevated blood glucose, environmental toxins, stress included, unhealthy diet and lifestyle behaviors, then we can see the factors that trigger cancer cells to occur, or the increased risk of cancer occurring overall in the individual. Once we understand those factors, then we can change those unhealthy lifestyles and dietary factors and improve the overall outcome.
When it comes to cancer, there are different ways to approach it. You can approach it using conventional medical procedures such as chemotherapy, radiation therapy, surgery, and all that. Or you can start to recognize, can I treat it without interfering with the function of the body? So the first question is, where does the cancer come from? Then there's the belief that a cancer is caused by a cancer gene. I say, how did that come about? And the answer is, in a Newtonian world, the physical body is affected by physical things only. So when a person has a cancer, the source of that cancer must be something physical. And so they take apart the body looking for what is unique to the cancer. Then they start to show there are something called oncogenes, cancer genes. Well, this has become the biggest problem in the world for a very simple point. There is no gene that causes cancer. There is no gene that causes cancer. There is no gene that causes cancer. It's not caused by a gene. It's caused by not being in harmony with the world around you and engaging a gene that can cause cancer. So, for example, so many women are affected by the BRCA1 gene, the breast cancer gene. Hearing they have that gene in their body immediately puts their consciousness on a track that says, oh my God, I'm going to get cancer, I have the gene. Well, this is starting off on a false belief, and that is that the gene causes cancer. There is no gene that does cause cancer. The BRCA1 gene, does it cause cancer? Well, let's put it this way. 50% of the women that have the BRCA1 gene never get the cancer. Well, there's an important conclusion right there. Possession of the gene does not cause cancer. It's the gene in addition to a lifestyle that is not in harmony. That's where the cancer comes from.
So, as a result of this knowledge or this approach, when I started working with cancer, it was back in New York around the year, I'd already quit doing conventional medicine, and it was around the year 2000. And I figured that, well, number one, we got to stop making cancer. We got to stop producing it. If we don't stop producing it, then what are we doing? We're going to cut it out, it'll come back. We'll cut it out, it'll come back. It's an endless thing, chasing your tail. So that doesn't make sense. So we got to stop making cancer. Think about this. Suppose a woman does have a lump or a man does have a tumor on his prostate or in his pancreas, but it never grows another millimeter and it doesn't spread anywhere. Well, you'd live a normal life. It's like having a pimple on your face. You don't want it there, but you're not going to die. You can still live normally. So it may be an inconvenient in one way, but if you've got a tumor inside, but it doesn't grow anymore, then you won't even know it. So when the person comes to me, they're not really saying to me, how do I get rid of this? They're really saying, how do I stop doing this? How do I stop making cancer?
So that led me to ask the question, if genes don't cause cancer, and cancer is not something that you catch like a cold or a virus, but rather something you create within your body. And the latest statistics tell us that only about 5 to 10% of cancer is actually hereditary, meaning 90 to 95% of cancer does not come from hereditary circumstances. Then what are the deeper conditions that promotes cancer growth in the human body?
An understanding of genetics on the old story is called genetic determinism, the idea that a gene, which is a blueprint to make the parts of the body, that a gene activates itself. So we talk about a gene turning on and a gene turning off and controlling our physical experience on this planet. The new science, epigenetics, reveals a completely different story. It says that the truth, genes are simply blueprints, just like in an architect's office. Go into an architect's office and she's working on a blueprint. You ask her, is your blueprint on or off? And she would look at you like, well, you're crazy. It's a blueprint. There's no on and off. And then I go, profoundly important. A gene is a blueprint. We've given it the character or the ability of turning on and off, self-actualization. This is completely untrue. A gene is strictly a blueprint and acts in that same manner. A gene doesn't know what it is, why it is, what it does, and therefore is not in a situation to make decisions. The new science, epigenetics, is based on the fact that the field in which we live, the energy in which we live, is primarily the character that activates or inactivates a gene. Okay? So the important point is this. Cells live in an environment. The environment they live in is in tissue culture called culture medium. And what my research revealed very simply was this. By changing the chemistry of the culture medium and feeding these identical cells, genetically identical cells, with 3 different versions of culture medium in 3 different Petri plates. In Petri plate 1, the cells form muscle. In Petri plate 2, the cells form bone. And in the 3rd Petri plate, the cells form fat cells, because each one had a different culture medium, but they were all genetically identical. The point is very critical because what it revealed was the control of behavior was not in the genes. All the cells had the same genes. The control was mediated by the environment in which the cells are living. So it wasn't genetic control, it was environmental control. And then you say, so, well, that's nice. That's a laboratory experience of working with stem cells. And I then stand back and give a very important point. When we look in the mirror and see ourselves as individuals, it's an illusion because a human is made out of about 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. So a human, in a humorous sense, is a skin-covered petri dish with 50 trillion cells inside. And I say, yeah, but now we have the original culture medium called blood. And the chemistry of the culture medium is what is controlling the fate of the cells. So the chemistry of the blood in our body is what controls the character and behavior of our 50 trillion cells. Then the next important question is, then what controls the chemistry? And that's where, and all of a sudden it gets interesting because it says the brain is the chemist that controls the composition of the culture medium, which in turn controls the behavior and genetics. And then the next and most important fact is, well, then what chemistry should the brain release into the blood? And then the answer is amazing because it says the mind creates an image. The brain translates that image into chemistry, complementary chemistry, and then releases that chemistry in the body. The result is the body becomes a physical complement to the image in the mind. And as you change your mind, you change your chemistry. And therefore, the control of your behavior and genetics is not in the genes, but is in the mind, which sets up an image, and then the brain translates that into chemistry in the culture medium, which in turn controls the genetics and the behavior. And the relevance about this is profoundly important. Because if genes controlled our lives as we've been told and they turn on and off by themselves, we have no control. But with epigenetics, it reveals that the chemistry of the blood is what controls the fate of the cells. And since that's connected to our mind and our consciousness, then all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, if I change my consciousness, I change my biology. And I go, precisely. And therefore, we're not victims because we're the ones that control that consciousness.
Interestingly enough, even the Centers for Disease Control, which is the standard cancer treatment people, what they're essentially saying is about 80% of the chronic degenerative conditions we get, including cancer, result from stress, emotional issues we go through, experiences, traumas, all kinds of things.
We know that our emotions have a deep and profound impact on our immune system, for example. We know that when we feel stressed, it has a detrimental impact on our immune system. It actually causes greater pathology. So we need to come into harmony and balance between the mind and the body.
So the separation of the mind body is really the deeper cause of the issues. And that's also the deeper cause of, wanting more, consuming more, owning more, fighting more, controlling more. So all this energy is causing more stress. More stress in this body, but also more stress in our life and causing more stress on the planet Earth. And that's everything, all the challenge we're facing, all the crisis, you name it, a whole big list is the expression of that stress, that separation.
We consider that the body is like a tree that grows on the ground of the mind. So the tree, which is the body, cannot be healthy if the ground is also not healthy. So the ground of the mind has to be made more healthy. And stress is a poison. When a patient is diagnosed with cancer, I go with them through several psychological factors. Stress is one of them, very important. Second factor I see a lot in the consciousness of cancer patients is resentment. Resentment of not having been what I expected to be. Resentment because people didn't consider me or don't consider me as well as I think. Resentment that something went wrong. But this resentment has a bit the quality of anger. But anger is like a flare up, very big, You cannot sustain anger for more than a few hours. You will be exhausted. But resentment, so it's like a fire, big fire. Resentment is more this anger sustained in time, a low grade of fire. But this will break all your mind and it will break your body. And possibly the most important part in all this mind work that you have to do with a chronic disease patient or a cancer patient is that they become aware, not so much to solve it, they become aware of the content of their consciousness.
Because that's one of the major things that we have to work, anger. The famous phase of why me is really an anger phase. And the anger is going to be lastly against God. Why did you allow this to happen to me? And it's a very valid question. And so I work a lot with the patients that if you cannot change your mindset from why me to what for, you will not go forth. And so it's very important to say, well, it is me. I don't understand why. Now what for? And there's a tremendous message. I have a patient that we said, we're gonna pray and we're gonna ask God for healing today. And he said, I can't be healed today. Well, why? You don't have faith? Oh no, I believe very strongly that I could be healed today, but I cannot. Why? He said, because I have 3 sons that were divorced. The 3 of them divorced. Because of my cancer, and that I had such a good relationship with my daughters-in-law. 2 of my sons are already back with their wives. 1 isn't. I cannot be healed today. See, he found a reason for his cancer, and that changed everything. Now the 3 of them are back together, and he's cancer-free. So, you know, the power of your mind and your faith is a lot more stronger than any medication that I can offer. So it's very important to help patients reframe themselves from anger into hope.
In addition to our mind and emotions directly affecting the cellular function of the body, there are a number of toxins we need to be aware of and avoid at all costs, which affect the health of the cells, impact the immune system, and are directly linked to causing cancer.
Anything that changes the metabolic dance, the metabolic process that the cell is engaged in from aerobic to anaerobic, resulting in a chronic fermentative state, is what we call cancer. So anything that causes that, and what is that? That's toxins. Any kind of toxins, and there's enough toxins in the extracellular fluid around a cell. The cell is now going to be dealing with those toxins and metabolizing and changing, and the mitochondria are going to die. They're the most vulnerable parts of the cell. And once they die, we go into what's called cancer. So lots of toxins, and those are all kinds of toxins, from pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, plastics, and the plastics are also going to change the, they're what we call xenoestrogens, and they change the hormone receptor status.
Pesticides have xenoestrogenic effects, and all plastics are xenoestrogens. We are in a sea of xenoestrogens. One of the most commonly used pesticides in America is atrazine. And when the runoff of atrazine is runoff into lakes and rivers where there's frogs, there's actually been male frogs that have started to develop female characteristics, and you can't distinguish them anymore from a female frog because those xenoestrogens actually acted as estrogen in the male's body and turned them into female, and then started to promote cancers in both frogs, male and female. The more unopposed estrogen you have, the more likely you are to have cancer, male or female.
Right now we have problems with our water. We have problems with the air that we breathe in certain cities. For example, if you went to China, there are certain cities now that they all wear masks because of the pollution. Los Angeles, maybe. Also, here in other places we can find contamination in certain things in the water, in our food, and more importantly, our body care products, which people inadvertently don't think about. We're putting on these things daily and daily over decades, and over decades we can see the absorption of some of these toxins in our skin as well.
Toxins come from various forms. There's xenoestrogens, there's chemicals, there's plastics from bottled water, there's makeup, there's many forms of exposure that we tend to have hormonal changes in the body due to these toxins.
A normal woman in Occidental culture puts in a year 1.5 kilograms of cosmetics on her skin. These cosmetics don't just vaporize and go away. A lot of the components go in. And there are some components called hormone disruptors. Now, just the very name is implying that your health is not going to be affected in a good way. Hormone disruptors. So you are going to have a problem with hormones.
So hormones are very powerful substances. They're made in the body in parts per billion, parts per trillion. They are hugely impacting every single cell of the body. When they are in balance, they support us to have optimal functioning. And it's not just, the reproductive functions. When you look at estrogen is responsible for brain cells, for lung cells, for blood sugar balance, managing inflammation. It gives many signals in the body. So we really need to understand that our hormones are impacting every aspect of who we are. When they're in balance, they're working as they should. But when they are out of balance, and particularly we're talking about hormones such as estrogen and progesterone, which are key hormones for women, then all sorts of symptoms and manifestations of imbalance occur. The problem right now is that we live in a world that is highly estrogenic. This has never existed before in the history of humanity. We have 80,000 chemicals in the environment, many of which are estrogenic in nature, which means they have the same exact molecular structure as our own hormones do, as our own estrogens. So we are breathing them in, we're eating them, they're in our personal skin products, we're absorbing them. They're coming in from all these avenues at a rate that the body really does not have the capacity to process. And the reason why they can become such a risk factor, because one of the jobs of estrogen is to proliferate the growth of cells. So estrogen, when a woman is coming into puberty, a young woman is coming into puberty, it creates, her shapeliness, her breast, her hips, and that womanly form. That's all driven by estrogen. Estrogen's message is grow. It proliferates cell growth. When it's done and produced appropriately, of course, we get appropriate results. But if we have too much estrogen, if the balance is out of whack, then that grow message just keeps going and going. And if you happen to have cancer cells brewing in your body, estrogen is like fuel to the fire. It will feed that growth.
So we have plastics, we have cosmetics, we have food, and we have water, the quality of water. Water is very important. I tell my patients, if you don't have a good water, our body is 80 or 85% water. If you don't have a good water, you are never going to heal. Yeah. So it is important to have a good source of water. The best way is either to have a fountain which is uncontaminated in many countries. For instance, where I live near the mountains, there is very good water, naturally. Or to put a purification system like reverse osmosis, plus a carbon filter, yeah? Not only reverse osmosis, carbon filter and reverse osmosis. There are other contaminants like Teflon in the pans we use, fire retardants. For instance, we buy a carpet, beautiful carpet, yeah, but this carpet has fire retardants, so try to put carpet which are more natural, like wool or cotton. But as I said, maybe today I think the most dangerous chemicals are plastics. So the concept of hygiene and the concept of easy life, it is easy. We have to revise it. I don't think we can go on with this for us and for the environment. And this is something Gerson said very beautiful. He said, if the environment is sick, our bodies are going to be sick because they're interlinked, they're related.
So it's clear that there's hidden and toxic chemicals all around us that cause cancer. And according to Dr. Joseph Mercola, over the last 50 years, from 70,000 to 100,000 different chemicals have been introduced into the world's markets, with about 1,500 new ones added each year. These everyday chemicals can be found in plastics, furniture, food wrap, cookware, cans, carpets, shower curtains, electronics, and even your shampoo. And if we're to live healthier, more sustainable lives, we have to start eliminating these chemicals from our houses and our bodies by making better decisions in what we buy and what we use for ourselves and our children. In addition to removing chemicals from our cosmetics, carpets, bottled drinks, and our houses, there are also some very important and specific cancer-causing elements millions of people are ingesting every single day that can be avoided once you're aware of what they are.
When we talk about environmental risk factors for cancer, that includes everything that your body comes into contact with or absorbs, which includes food. There are many cancer-causing chemicals that are still allowed in the food supply, such as sodium nitrate in processed meats, for example. It's allowed by the FDA, but it causes cancer.
The westernized diet is pretty much a fast food, highly processed, industrial factory farmed, GMO, high salt, fat, sugar diet. And it's high calorie, low nutrient value. And that's why we see obesity in America, although we can say that we're actually starved of nutrition. So this is now being sent everywhere around the world. So for example, if I were to go to India and now go to certain places in the bigger cities, we can see that, there's restaurants that have golden arches now and huts that are selling pizzas, for example. And these places now we can see with the data epidemiologically that per square mile radius closer to these restaurants, we see a higher increased risk of overall westernized diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, and now even cancer risk.
If you compare the nutrient value of broccoli between now and 1950, as much as 60% of the calcium is less. Our farm soil is farmed out. GMOs are one of the major causes of cancer. Monsanto testing was for 10 rats for 3 months, no cancer. Corn, fed them corn. Seralini in France did the same study, but didn't stop, didn't abort at 3 months. He went on to 7 months. You should see the size of the tumors. Then a scientist in Thailand did the identical study and came with the identical result. There is no question that GMOs cause cancer in minute concentrations. We're being poisoned to death and starved to death.
And when we realize that when we take a bite of food, the molecules of that food go throughout the digestive tract, it gets in contact with every cell of the body, from the digestive tract to the lymphatics to the bloodstream. So the foods you choose to consume every day have a profound effect. In those cultures that have certain processed foods, foods that are higher in excess fat, cholesterol and protein, the incidence of breast cancer, prostate cancer, various forms of other cancers, lymphomas, we can see the differences between cultures. In one of the large-scale studies, the China study, they took groups of people, and when they drew their blood and compared their diets, and they compared the incidence of cancer, there was a very clear relationship to those people who ate more of an unprocessed, almost like a farmer's diet. They were out in the wild, they were collecting fruits and vegetables. The longest lived cultures in the world, like Okinawa, they eat a lot of fruit and a lot of vegetables. The cultures that eat a lot of processed foods, particularly meats and dairy products, have the highest incidence of various forms of cancer.
So after I look at the diet journal, I want to look at some metabolic parameters of people's health. And the main ones that I look at are blood sugar and insulin, because cancer thrives in a high sugar, high insulin environment.
Cancer cells actually all absorb huge amounts of sugar. In fact, cancer cells are diagnosed with a PET scan by many oncologists. So radioactive sugar is injected into a person, and you will find that if a person has cancer, a lot of that sugar will absorb into specific locations of the body where cancer cells are.
And so by looking at things like hemoglobin A1C and fasting insulin, which are both blood tests that my clients can get from their doctor, I can get a sense of how well they're handling their blood sugar.
So cancer cells have this odd function. They absorb all this sugar. So now what's interesting is when a person is eating refined sugar or foods that make their sugar spike or elevate, that's very damaging to the body. In fact, it can kill a person. If your pancreas fails and your sugar's all over the place surging, you can die from that. Excess sugar dehydrates your cells. And since the body's almost made purely out of water, if you start losing water from your cells, they lose their function and they die. So when sugar surges, it damages our cells or destroys them. And the body does not want to lose its cells, so it will adapt.
I mean, if you want to be healthy, it's not good to eat a lot of sugar. But if you have cancer, it's not good to eat a lot of sweet things, because this is going to feed your tumor.
So a huge focus has been on how to eat better with regards to blood sugar imbalances. But what's oftentimes overlooked is that when a person is stressed, if they're having a stressful day at work, or if they're stressed with their spouse, or if they're stressed with their kids, or if someone cuts them off in traffic, you can have your blood sugar surge from that. It's called the fight or flight response, and that's one of the side effects of stress. your blood sugar can surge and can damage cells just like it would as if you went and drank, liquid sugar like a pop.
Even though sugar, I think we should consider it a psychoactive drug in the sense that if you are anxious, you are fearful, you are alone, when you eat sugar, you feel better. But if you have cancer, you have to be aware that this maybe is not the best way to deal with your anxieties.
So, the only way to avoid excess sugar and toxic chemicals is to become very mindful of the ingredients in the food and the products that we buy. But there's a deeper question around all this as well, which is, if our own governments allow the creation and promotion and sales of substances which are well documented to cause cancer and other chronic diseases such as processed foods, GMOs, chemical pesticides, highly processed sugar, and chemicals in our everyday body care products, then shouldn't our healthcare and medical systems, at the very least, be designed to support our health, vitality, and well-being? In technocratic countries such as the United States and other developing countries around the world, we're seeing a healthcare system which continues to improve exponentially with acute trauma care, such as stitching a gunshot wound or replacing an organ or severed limb. But when it comes to healing chronic disease, such as cancer, why is our medical industry's effectiveness lagging compared to many natural and integrative options available?
The study was done by cancer specialists in Australia, in Sydney. There were 3 cancer doctors that got together to determine the effectiveness of chemotherapy in treatment of cancer. It was kind of interesting. They looked at the history of 235,000 cancer cases from 1990 through 2004 when they completed the study. And 165,000 of them were in the United States and about 70,000 or so in Australia. And what they were trying to determine was what is the effectiveness of chemotherapy compared to people who do not get chemotherapy. And the way they measured that was the relative improvement of 5-year survival by people who got the chemo versus those who did not. Well, what they found, on average, looking at about 40 different types of cancer, was that in the United States group, the improvement with the chemo was 2.1% in 5-year survival. In Australia, it was 2.3%. What they were showing was that most of the time, the terrible results of using the chemotherapy, which can be very, very damaging to the person, but always causes side effects of all kinds, ruins the quality of life for the person, that it was almost not effective at all in doing what the surgeon or the cancer doctor is trying to do, which is extend the life of the person.
That's a very interesting study because, it's not great when you average it all together and make a statistic. It's a little, misleading, but a lot of those cancers that they looked at in the study, because it looked at 22 different cancers, some of them, it was 0. 0 survivors at 5 years, like pancreatic cancer is one, and sarcoma. And then there were some that were actually much better than 2%, like lymphomas, leukemias, and testicular. They're up in the 30, 40, 50%, success rate. So to be fair, they do respond better. But the vast majority of solid tumor cancers have terrible response to chemotherapy. And what I mean by response is cure, long-term cure. You can certainly shrink any tumor with chemo short-term, but it's going to come back worse with a vengeance. And most cancer patients end up worse than they started because now they've got metastasis all over their body because chemo destroyed their immune system, potentially caused secondary cancers, and made existing cancer stem cells more aggressive.
Because of that, almost anyone you meet has either had it, or a family member has had it, or a friend has had it, or an office where you can't find anybody who doesn't know something, doesn't have some sort of personal experience with it. And they have therefore seen how the conventional approach, what it does. And they've watched their grandma, their friend, just be swallowed up by machines in the ICU. They lose their hair, they lose their integrity, they lose self-respect, they lose everything, their functionality, and they get eaten up. And we now know actually that people die more from the quote treatments than from the cancer itself.
You know, I just saw a tremendous amount of suffering, and a lot of it was from the disease, but a lot of it was also from the chemotherapy and the medications that we were giving them. And I just sort of, at one point, felt that we were just adding medication on top of medication on top of medication to treat symptoms and to treat side effects. And it just didn't seem to be, you know, that productive. And so I felt sort of frustrated. And, you know, at some point, I think all of my hopes in Western medicine as the answer, as a single entity, kind of went to the wayside. And I started looking at other types of therapies, such as acupuncture, to try to treat some of these side effects and other conditions without adding an additional side effect profile.
It doesn't seem very logical to me to put more toxins into your body. It hasn't worked for me. I felt dead whenever I was on chemo, and now I just feel more alive. I just feel like I actually have a chance of living.
In medical school, we are taught the basic sciences, and then we're taught pharmacology, and then we are taught basically how to utilize that pharmacology in a medical setting when you talk to a patient. We taught how to do a history and physical, and interestingly enough, a lot of the art of taking a history and physical has been lost because everything has to be very lickety-split, fast. Do you have this? Do you have that? And we don't really get to the layers of people and really physical exam testing, like, why do you take your temperature? You know, there's value to taking a temperature. We always look when it's too high, but what happens if it's too low? And we are not taught that in medical school. I don't remember, other than being in a hypothermic situation, but even a degree off, your temperature matters. And then what is your blood pressure? What is ideal blood pressure? What is ideal pulse? What is your respiration? What does your tongue look like? What do your fingernails look like? We've lost that. And this is things that I've learned over these past 28 years, how to incorporate these other art of examining a person and taking a history. And then, so when doctors come out, they're learned to really cursory look, take a history, take a physical, because that's what the system now lends to. Unfortunately, it's okay, we only have 5 minutes, let's get in there, talk, let me do an exam, and I'll explain the drug I'm going to give you, if they even do that. And usually that's what the toolkit a doctor has today is a medical prescription. If you have a headache, you may get different types of medicine for that. It's not like, well, do you have a food allergy? Do you have stress? Are you exposed to environmental pollutants? So that takes time for a doctor to, and be an investigator for the patient to decipher really why do they have mold and it's causing chronic sinus congestion.
The tools that I had obtained in my medical training and in my fellowship training, I felt that I, had a grasp of medications, of radiation, of surgery, and some other types of pretty, harsh and invasive therapies, but it just didn't equip me to take care of the patient, the whole patient.
What we find in organized healthcare is that people are being deprived of their humanity. And we have objectified the experience and eliminated the importance of rapport and relationship, really trying to understand what does the illness or the disease mean to the person? How are they defining their experience? These are really important dimensions. Understanding what motivates and inspires us can help us to more easily develop a healing strategy that would be appropriate to the person. So people come in with different worldviews, belief systems, ways of engaging reality. And those models are very, very important for how they define their experience, what they seek out in terms of healthcare options, and ultimately what will heal them. Because we know that our beliefs, our expectancies are very powerful modalities for facilitating a healing response.
Well, I think we can't deny that Western medicine has a place in, in sort of the treatment of the cancer patient. But I think we can be, I like to use the word enlightened about the way we approach this patient and make sure that we're taking care of the patient and really looking to heal the patient rather than only cure the patient.
We have everything available. Surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, as well as a myriad of alternatives. And we have found that when we prepare a patient for any anti-tumor agent, being natural or conventional, that the results are much better. Even when we use chemotherapy, we can use it, as I mentioned before, in very low dosages and with a lot more efficacy and virtually without any side effects. So we integrate everything, but our aim is to provide the best therapy for a patient at the lowest cost, money-wise, emotionally, and physically. There are many conventional therapies that can be very effective, but at a tremendous cost in all areas, but especially physically and emotionally, that are so devastating that a lot of times they would rather die than continue with that therapy. So by integrating them, we have been able to be a lot more effective and keeping our patients alive.
Now, what does the word integrate mean? It means bringing together a mixture of a variety of things. So an integrative approach to medicine is looking at the different disciplines. We've got naturopath, we've got Ayurvedic medicine, we've got conventional medicine, we've got osteopathic medicine, we've got homeopathic medicine, acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine. Each one of these disciplines has aspects of it that are excellent, that work. And so what we've done in the field of integrative oncology, integrative medicine, is we've found the best of all of these worlds and we've brought them together. We're not saying that conventional is all bad. It does have some value and we do it. If you need something to stabilize the trauma, you go to the allopaths. That's what they're really good at. Okay? And there's also things. So chemo is really good against the cancer, but not against the rest of the body. So how do we target it so it just goes there? Okay, but if we're just doing that and we're not stopping to produce the cancer, then we're on an endless cycle. So you see, if you don't integrate all this knowledge and modalities, you're not going to achieve it. Even if you have a good integrative approach. If I'm using just vitamin C, but I'm smoking. How about I'm using vitamin C, I'm smoking, and I'm eating cheeseburgers? Okay, so then I still haven't done it. So if you don't integrate, you can't be successful.
We know that Western-based medicine has been grounded in science, and science is grounded in ideas of materialism and reductionism. So the idea that the only valid truth is the physical, and that we're going to understand that truth by dividing it up into pieces. The integral perspective comes from the opposite dimension. It's really arguing that there are multiple dimensions to our experience, and that in order to really understand the nature of healing, it requires a holistic view, an integral view. When we take an integral approach, we're interested in looking at the multiple aspects or facets of the healing response. So there's the inner dimensions, my own personal experience, my sense of wellness or dis-ease. There's the cultural aspects. How do I define my state of wellness? How do I seek treatments? What are the options for me? Then there's the social aspects where there are institutions that support, going to a hospital or seeing somebody in a clinic. These are aspects. And then there are laws and structures that define our experience of healthcare. And then there's the evidence-based, objective aspect where we look to see what works and what doesn't work. And I think it's by holding all of those dimensions that we can really begin to see a more effective healthcare system.
The medical field more focused on the physical. Yeah. Then integrative method, more focus on somewhere in the middle. Yeah, more spiritual approach, more focus on the invisible, the spiritual aspect, the mind aspect. Yeah. So when we're recognizing the energy as a whole, then we all can come together, working together. And that's what I love about Qigong. It's not excluding, conventional medicine. It's recognizing the conventional medicine still only focus on, most of the time, is physical only. Most time is symptom management. That's why we call this disease a chronic or incurable condition. We do whatever we can to manage the system, to sustain life longer, to minimizing the suffering. So it's dealing with the physical energy, basically. Yeah, it's helpful. Yeah, so the whole picture, is incorporating the emotional energy, the mental energy, the spiritual energy, including the wholeness of energy. Recognizing everything we experience in our life has impact for function as human beings, including physical, emotional, mental levels.
I see my goal as an integrative medicine provider, integrative medicine physician, to be able to offer patients the best of all worlds. So the best of the Western medicine world, as well as the best of the complementary world. And in cases where I don't know, I want to be able to say, I will look that up for you, and I'm going to find out what I can about that for you.
A true integrative approach does not deny the physical dimension, nor does it deny the dimensions of mind, emotions, energy, and spirit. Rather, it includes all human dimensions, physical and non-physical, to create a holistic approach to healing and wellness. And to understand how to create holistic healing and vitality in your life, we must understand how the immune system works and how to use our beliefs, the food, environment, sleep, exercise, spirituality, energy, and nature to support our body's ability to function at its highest level.
There are two protection systems in the human body. A protection system that protects us from threats on the outside of the body, such as saber-toothed tigers. That's called the adrenal system, also in school, fight or flight system. But if we have invasive organisms that start to mess up our biology on the inside, there's another protection system called the immune system, whose function is to look at the terrain or the environment inside the body and keep it healthy and harmony.
Fortunately, the body has a backup system. Beyond the cell committing suicide, it has a system called the immune system. And this is a wonderful system designed by somebody marvelous with about 120 different types of cells that patrol the body, all of it. About 70% of it occurs in our gut, literally, but the immune system is very capable of handling cancer cells, and it does for every one of us.
Cancer may come back again, but if my immune system is strong, it either won't be as bad or I'll be able to combat it completely.
Therapies that are successful, that are effective, are ones that help to stimulate your own body's immune system. It helps to improve the detoxification process of your body. It helps to vitalize your body. It helps to bring you in balance.
There is a cure for cancer. It's called a healthy immune system. So if we can get that going, stop making cancer and eliminate it, we've got the whole package.
And yet the immune system uses a lot of energy. The answer is very simple. As people get sick, they have so little energy, many of them can't get out of bed. So we're talking about a system that uses a lot of energy. And why this is relevant is if, for example, we are being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, where do you want your energy to go? And it's important because if I'm being chased, I want my arms and legs for me to get that flight so I can get out of there. So I want the energy to go to my arms and legs using the adrenal system as a distributor of the energy. In contrast, if I have an infection inside my system, I want the energy to be redirected to the inside to deal with whatever the problem is. So all of a sudden it says, well, which system should I be putting my effort on? And I say, where are your threats coming from? If your threats are external, then by definition, you're going to put all your energy into the fight or flight system. And they say, well, how do you do that? And here's the most important part, is that when we need to distribute the energy, we distribute it to where we need it. And since the immune system will not be necessary to protect me from a saber-toothed tiger, I want to shut off the energy to the immune system because it's going to take away from available energy for survival. So it turns out, interesting enough, when stress hormones are released into the body, the kind that are released when a saber-toothed tiger is chasing us, stress hormones actually shut off the immune system and simultaneously redirect the blood of the body where the energy is to feed the arms and legs for fight or flight. So basically it says when we are threatened by outside threats, the adrenal system will shut down the immune system to conserve energy. And this is profoundly important. It's a hierarchy. In other words, simple point. Let's say you have a bacterial infection and could have a bad case of diarrhea, and you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Where would you redirect your energy to? Which one? It's obvious. The heck with the bacteria. I need to get away from the tiger, so therefore adrenal response will shut off the immune system and encourage fight or flight behavior. If you want to enhance the immune system and deliver energy to it, then you really have to focus on where are you putting your energy. If we keep looking outside and watching the TV and reading the news, our energy is always going toward self-protection of fear of what's going on in a world that's changing out there. So we keep pushing our energy on the outside. But if you start to get sick, what you really need to do is redirect to the energy on the inside. So we have to let go of the stressors that are causing the inhibition of the immune system. Therefore, we really have to focus on happiness and harmony in our worldview so that our internal energy can be directed toward dealing with an internal problem rather than being used to save our lives from an external threat.
There's a lot of different things we can do. Stress lowers our immune system. And when we don't have a functioning immune system, that's when we get sick and we're more prone to diseases and illnesses, right? So it's all about doing things on an everyday basis. Like, how can we improve our immunity? Being happier improves your immunity. Eating more sustenance, more nourishment into our bodies that allows us to thrive. We're not supposed to get sick. It's unnatural for us to get sick. And that's what people need to realize. A lot of things that we're doing nowadays is unnatural. So it's like going back to basics, eating fresh fruits and vegetables, being more balanced about your approach.
For example, in Okinawa, these individuals who eat a plant-rich diet, they consume lots of sweet potatoes, purple sweet potatoes, a lot of oranges, fruits and vegetables, seed plants. They consume meat only about twice a month, and that would be fish only twice a month. Contrary to popular belief, they don't eat hardly any meat, virtually no dairy product. And these individuals, they're so active during their daily activities. They're incredibly healthy, virtually no dementia, virtually no heart disease, the lowest rate of cancer amongst the planet. And here, they're near Fukushima, they're near radiation particles, they're exposed to toxins too, but they have a very light attitude about life, a loving attitude. Their family, their peers work together. They use herbal medicine, not toxic chemical medicines. And these individuals are the longest lived culture in the world.
And in fact, I had someone come to me the other day and said, oh, I'm trying to be paleo in my diet, I want to be more paleo. And he was a cancer patient. And I said, well, no, actually the data shows that you need to eat more plants. But all the research that you see using phytonutrients only comes from plants, right? So there's not a single drug out there. There's not a single drug that for any condition matter that's coming, say, for example, from bacon, right? But we see all these plants, and these plants are really important to understand.
My best advice for anyone wishing to prevent cancer is to adopt a low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet and try to eat as much organically grown food as possible, to stay clear of GMOs. From the dietary standpoint, that is my recommendation.
The best is to be close to nature. Actually, Gerson said something similar, yeah? Try to eat not very manufactured food, processed food. Try to eat food in the most natural way.
The answer I got when I asked for another way was nutrition. It was changing my life. It was taking control of my life, taking ownership of my sickness, of my disease, and also taking responsibility for my health. And that, even though I knew it was going to be hard, I didn't know how hard, but I knew it was going to be hard because I didn't have much support. And everybody thought I was crazy, except for my mom. I still knew I had to do it. It still made more sense to me than poisoning myself. And so that's what I did. I radically changed my diet. I started juicing. I was eating, I went from eating about 1 serving of fruits and vegetables a day to eating between 15 and 20 every day. So I was drinking 64 ounces of vegetable juice every day. I was eating giant salads with cruciferous and allium vegetables. I was making fruit smoothies with all the cancer-fighting berries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, coconut, like all this good stuff. And my goal was to overdose on nutrition.
I discovered raw foods. And that was another level of healing. But wow, I really feel that's when the miracles started to happen. And I embraced green juice. I met a woman by the name of Lisa Wilson, and I spent a week with Lisa, immersed in raw foods. And I was there the first morning and had my first glass of totally green juice. I couldn't get enough. My cells were so happy. They kept filling me. I wanted more and more and more. And now I'm a total juiceaholic. I have a full alkaline lifestyle. I'm about 80% raw. I lost 28 pounds. Yay, I love it.
It's smart to pick up these green vegetable plant-based foods, kale, Swiss chard, arugula, beets, pomegranate. These then can either be juiced and at least 6 to 8 ounces worth swished around in the mouth. Don't just gulp it down because the enzymes need to convert the nitrate into nitric oxide. Also, you can put them in big salads. You can certainly prepare them in various other dishes. They're a marvelous base to building the immune system. I might add, there's also the cruciferous vegetables, Napa cabbage, bok choy, savior cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli. These donate what's called diindolylmethane and indole 3-carbinol. There's probably 360,000 different phytochemicals and enzymes that most of science hasn't even caught up to. But when you take in these natural phytochemicals, they donate a cytochrome enzyme, and it helps to disrupt the P451 cycle, which basically, as it contributes and it helps, it detoxifies harmful estrogens, whether they be xenoestrogens from pesticides and chemicals, or from birth control pills, or from synthetic hormones. These harmful estrogens are known to stimulate the production of or abnormal changes in cellular tissue. We know that a high-fat diet increases the rate of prolactin, and prolactin is present in women who have a high rate of breast cancer. So as we start eating more of these cruciferous vegetables with a low-fat, whole foods diet, I didn't say a fat-free diet, I mean get your fats from soaked nuts and seeds, avocado, coconut. You have to get as close to unprocessed foods back to nature. Kale, Swiss chard, arugula, beets, use the pomegranate, certainly bok choy, Napa cabbage. These are all the rich, nutrient-dense foods. Now, they don't have enough fiber by themselves, so you have to include soaked nuts and seeds. In a crock pot, prepare beans, and then you're going to get about 30 to 60 grams of fiber a day. That's what you're going to need to detoxify the body on a daily basis.
The reason I went to medical school was that big question. Why is there so much sickness? And, many of us will think, well, sickness means cancer, arthritis, diabetes, hypertension. But in fact, sickness is also marital discord. You know, sickness is anxiety, sickness is depression, you know, it's sickness of the mind.
So the essence of wisdom healing Qigong is really simple and yet profound. It's recognizing not only the mind, body is connected. So now the new, medicine, the new paradigm of healthcare is really recognizing the importance of mind, body together. So the mind is influencing the body and vice versa.
So you can think about something like the placebo, something that in standard biomedical research is the thing we want to eliminate. We want to rule it out. And yet you can think about the miraculous capacities that are inherent in a placebo. First of all, somehow it can be taken in and through our expectations, our beliefs, our perceptions, create some kind of physiological change. Well, how does that happen? And even more curious, how is it that it knows the particular cascade of responses necessary within the body to facilitate a healing response?
The placebo effect is, let's say I'm sick and a doctor says, here's the greatest new medication for you and this is going to heal you, and it's just right off the factory floor. It's the greatest thing. You take that pill and you get well, but only later find out it was a sugar pill. Then the most important question is asked, then what healed you? Well, not the sugar pill. It was the positive belief of healing generated by the belief in that sugar pill. Okay? And everyone, yes, oh yeah, what is the result of positive thinking? Well, you could have any disease in the world and heal yourself from that disease using the consequence of a placebo or positive thought. Okay? Well, what about negative thinking? I go, this has been left out of the equation far too long, and that is this. It's the power of thinking that determines the character of our lives. We focused on positive thinking as a reflection of what placebo is all about. Negative thinking is equally powerful in controlling our lives as is positive thinking, except it works in the opposite direction. A negative thought can cause any disease on this planet. A negative thought can kill you even if there's nothing wrong with you, but you believe you're going to die. You can die from this. So all of a sudden it says the power of thought, positive or negative, are influencing our lives, but in totally different directions.
We are essentially self-referencing beings. And what that means is that we rely heavily upon the external world for the way that we feel internally about ourselves, for our well-being. So when the world around us is in order, when everything's running along, it's chugging nice and smooth, the stock market seems like it's doing pretty well, the world's politics seem like they're reasonably smooth, we feel secure in our environment, we've got a job, everything's good, then we go, life feels pretty good. When that external world goes into chaos, which is largely what we're experiencing in the world right now, when unsustainable ways of thinking and living begin to break down, if we don't know who we are, if we don't have a rock solid foundation for who we are in here, then the uncertainty of that external world will throw us into chaos. And that is showing up in the world, not just America, not just in Europe, not just in the West, it's all over the world, as stress. It is showing up as stress, and stress is the foundation for the uptick in disease, emotional as well as physical disease that we're seeing all over the world, and the foundation for a lot of the cancers. Because if we are in unresolved stress 24/7, fight or flight with no ability to resolve that means we're kicking up the stress chemicals, the adrenaline, the cortisol, which is good for a brief period of time. But our bodies are not designed to live bathed in those chemicals day in and day out. So if we don't have a way to resolve that stress, give our bodies some relief, that's where we begin to see these conditions show up in our lives.
The new understanding of biology is that our cells are not controlling their own fate and what they become, healthy cells or sick cells. But the control of the cells is actually due to how we experience life. And if we change our experiences about life and our beliefs about life, we then change our biology. And then when we look at our biology, whether it's health or disease, we have to recognize this was not controlled below our consciousness. This was not controlled by genes, but was actually controlled by our thoughts and our beliefs. So the relevance is simply this: since we control our thoughts and our beliefs, we can change them. And if we change them, then we can change our biology. And all of a sudden it says then we're not victims in life because our thoughts and our consciousness are changing our biology.
Our bodies have been made in a miraculous way, and the mind's a big part of the body. We're physical, we're also mental, we're spiritual and emotional beings. And so I think it's important to remember that if you do face a cancer diagnosis and you have a diagnosis that's supposedly terminal, don't believe it. Your mind has a lot to do with that. The mind has a lot to do with your healing, and your bodies do have the power to heal. The power to heal is within us. If we maintain the positive emotions, if we maintain a clean diet, if we eat the right foods, if we give our body the proper fuel to run properly, it will run properly. And so, but I think a lot of that, this is the control switch. This is like the CPU, the computer switch of the body. So you keep the positive mental attitude going, and that has a lot to do with healing.
I was using this visualization practice. It was kind of popular at the time with Carl Simonton and others, talking a lot about imagining the cancer cells as the enemy and imagining the immune system as the heroes. And I would imagine this war going on in my body. I would do it before bed. And then one day I don't know what hit me, but I said, you know what? I'm sick of having this war go on. I was already ignoring my cancer and always fighting it. And I said, what happens if I love my cancer? What happens if I turn my attention to the sensations in my throat and love this part of me? And the instant I made that shift, my whole body started to kind of heat up and get enlivened.
Mindfulness allows us to sit back, to consciously choose to go into a state of deep relaxation and awareness, where we are free and capable, if we choose to do so, to watch all of the positive and negative thoughts constantly coming up and going down, coming up and going down. In this state of watching our thoughts, we begin to stimulate circuits in the brain that generate self-love, empathy. This is where those immune-enhancing genes begin to be stimulated. This is where you turn off the stress neurochemicals that are being released every time you have a worrisome thought. And having cancer is the most worrisome thing an individual can have. My wife has had cancer twice, and I sometimes think it's even worse for the spouse and the loved one to sit there helplessly, not knowing what can you possibly say to the other individual. And the best advice that we can give from our studies, from our research centers, is that you, the observer, you, the caretaker, you, the caregiver, needs to stay in this very deep state of relaxed awareness, focusing in on your own deepest, innermost values, bringing up images and memories of all of the love and kindness that you have towards different people. When you feel that little bit of consciousness with these beautiful, loving thoughts, you turn off the stress-producing chemicals in your brain. You eliminate the increase, the potential, and the possibility of cancer and virtually any other disease in the world.
So in Qigong, we not only recognizing the mind can affecting the body, but it's also the body is affecting the mind as well. So the healing is about mind, body, working together. It's less about, the mind overcoming the body, controlling the body, or the body is functioning by itself, or, become, the mind, become a victim of the body sometimes. When you're sick, the mind cannot function, effectively. So it's really about connection of the mind-body, is about the collaboration of the mind-body. So the technique is very sophisticated. It's less about how the mind-body work together. It's about accessing the energy. That means when you're accessing the energy, which is the connection of all existence of life. So not only the existence of the physical body, the existence of the mind, even the nature of consciousness, but also the subtle energy of the universe. The energy of the earth, the energy of the food, the energy of the environment, and the energy of relationship, the energy with the planet, the energy with the universe. Yeah, all that relationship have a direct impact on our health. Health is the function. Is the functioning of the physical body, emotional body, mental body, as well as the spiritual body working together.
I think it's really important for someone who's diagnosed with cancer to understand that cancer's been growing in their body a long time and slowly for most cases, and that they have time, they have options, and not to let anyone rush them into anything, not to let anyone push them to take action before they're ready, not to do anything that they're not comfortable with, not to say yes to any therapy or whatever that doesn't make sense to them, that they don't understand, that they have a gut feeling that this is wrong, right? To listen to your instincts and intuition. It's really important. And, you know, if anything, if I could reach cancer patients with just that message, you know, that your body can heal and that you really need to stop and take a good hard look at your life and ask yourself, why am I sick? Because when you ask yourself, you'll get the answer. You know, every cancer patient I've ever talked to and asked, why do you think you got cancer? Almost all of them say, well, I had a lot of stress in my life and I wasn't taking care of myself. They know it. They know the cause. And when you know the cause, then you can change your life and you can remove the causes. And when you remove the causes of disease, then you enable your body to heal.
Hope should always be given to the patient, because the opportunity for the patient to heal themselves, regardless of the stage of the disease or the cancer, is always an opportunity that's available to them. It's unfortunate, though, that a lot of times in conventional medicine, we take that away. So we even stamp them with a expiration date. And my patients who've live we call it further than the expiration date, is because they never believed it to begin with. Right? So once you put that instilled belief in that patient that you have 3 months to live, more likely than not, 3 months from that time, they will pass away. And for all our patients who say, you know what, I didn't believe that, because I believe I'm going to take today the responsibility and the appropriate actions to change my outcomes, then we see that actually occur.
So we need to step away from this fear tactic that's used in the cancer industry and start giving patients realistic hope rather than fear. We need to start teaching them, empowering them. Turn this around instead of having them being driven by fear, have them be driven by realistic, positive attitudes about their ability to heal. Because they do have that ability. They can heal from cancer.
The paradigm shift is understanding that you actually have control. And the reason, if you've developed cancer, it's there for a reason. And what's needed on your part is to start looking at your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual realities openly, and accept where you may have been doing things totally unaware in a way that's actually not serving you and creating stress in your body.
When people recognize that this is an imbalance in their body that needs to be corrected, and that there are relatively simple ways to deal with the issues that brought the cancer on, most of them find that they can heal themselves. And it's people in all stages of cancer, every kind of cancer imaginable.
Cancer is a wake-up call. I mean, it's a divine tap on the shoulder. It makes you really step back and evaluate your whole life.
Cancer is a life sentence. It's not a death sentence. It's a wake-up call. I believe that our body steps up when our mind isn't listening. And the body is basically saying, I've got something going on here that really needs to change.
How can you use this? Why did it happen for you? Not to you, but why did it happen for you? A lot of people say after they've been through the journey that it was one of the greatest gifts to ever come in their life.
I'll give you an example. I have a patient that I actually saw indirectly. It wasn't of a formal consult. Someone indirectly said, oh, this patient is a friend of mine. He's got this rare cancer. Only 8 people in the world have this cancer. And so I said, these are the things you got to do, because it's what we do for all cancer. I don't do anything slightly different. And not only did his cancer reverse and go away, he's the only surviving person that has this rare cancer, but he actually wrote a book. And it was because it's not until a lot of times we have to have this wake-up call, like, what is important to us? Maybe our family, our kids, we haven't spent time with them, we're working slave-in jobs, or we were working for the new car, or the bigger house. A lot of these things, once people get cancer, it really kind of puts us back into position of what is important, and really it's coming down to family, love, community, and our health. And at the end of the day, all you have is your health.
Getting cancer for me was almost like a gift. And I don't want that to sound cliche, but I really felt it was a gift for me to go inside. We're in this rat race, we're constantly running, and there's no time to consider yourself, raising children, working. So this was the gift of me. It was a signal that it was time to stop and go inside and personally explore things. I feel like I've been given a brand new life.
Remembering back to the day when I sat with my grandpa in Arizona as he struggled in tremendous pain from the toxic treatments he was receiving, while intuitively knowing there was a better way and wishing I knew what to say to him, yet feeling totally hopeless, afraid, and disempowered. If only I knew then what I know now, maybe his life could have been extended. Maybe he wouldn't have suffered so much. Maybe he could have lived longer and healthier. And while we all have things in our past we wish we could have changed, the truth is that we can only change how we live right now, with the hope of creating a brighter future for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. The biggest difference now is that I'm not afraid, and you don't have to be either. Knowledge is power, and we have the power to change, to heal, to reverse any disease. With all of this new information, what will you do to change your life and impact the lives of those you love? Will you lead by example? Will you change your diet? Eliminate chemicals from your life? Eat more organic and plant-based nutrition? Practice meditation? Learn Qigong? Listen to your heart? Bring more loving kindness into your life? Change your beliefs to support your health and healing? Will you give yourself the time and attention and care you need to heal your body, your mind, and your emotions? Well, my main hope is that you take just one thing away from this film and begin implementing it into your life today. Just changing one thing about our daily habits can have a dramatic improvement in our lives over the course of just a couple of years. While we can't change other people, we can change ourselves. And by changing ourselves, we have the greatest hope for inspiring others to change as well. And after more than a decade dedicated to health and healing, I continue to make these important changes in my own life. And my wish is that you will be inspired and empowered to do the same. So if cancer comes knocking, you won't be afraid. You'll know it's a wake-up call and an opportunity to love yourself even more, to eat healthier, think better, and appreciate every second of this miraculous thing we call life.